Hello everyone and welcome to the final episode of the World of Flashpoint. This week we are covering the final Flashpoint tie-ins. I'd love to say that I left the best for last, but I honestly don't know how good any of these are. We will be starting with 3 one-shots. The Canterbury Cricket, written by Mike Carlin, with art by Rags Morales and Rick Bryant. Grodd of War, written by Sean Ryan, with art by Iguera and Roy Jose. And Green Arrow Industries, written by Pornsak Pichette, with art by Iguera and Marco Castiello. So without further ado, let's get started with the Canterbury Cricket. The story begins with members of the Resistance, Etrigan, Miss Hyde, Godiva, and a character we haven't met yet named Ginny Greenteeth. This is before they met Penny Black and Lois. They are fighting against the Amazons and they are struggling against them, and that is when the Canterbury Cricket shows up and uses his abilities to deafen the Amazons so that the Resistance can get away. They run off and start a campfire, and they talk about how they've been struggling against the Amazons for ages, which just doesn't feel realistic because they got frickin' Etrigan on their side, and there's no way that Etrigan would struggle against just regular Amazonians, because, like, why? They're basically just regular humans who are stronger, faster, more athletic, but he's got superpowers. Like, he's supernatural. He can breathe fire. That should be enough. But now, we gotta make the Amazonians look really powerful, and it's while they are sitting around this campfire that we learn more about the Canterbury Cricket, because this one shot is all about him. He decides to tell them his backstory. His real name is Jeremy Chiriquai, and he is the worst son of a bitch on the human planet. He is a terrible person. He's just this asshole who liked this girl named Becca, and he's meeting with his friends, and that is when the Amazonians arrived and started attacking everybody, and he gets a bomb gets blown up in his face or something. There's an explosive that hits him in the face, messes up his face, and he goes up to Becca and he's like, help me, Becca, like, you always wanted to be with me, you always needed me, well, now I need you. And he grabs her and uses her as a human shield against an Amazon blade, which kills Becca. So you're just like, okay, this guy sucks. I kind of liked the Canterbury Cricket at first. I was interested in learning more about him. Now, I don't really give a shit about him. He takes refuge inside a church, a place that he hasn't been to in ages, and he begs for his life against this Amazon that changed after him, and is like, I'll give you all the intelligence you need, like, I'll give you any information, whatever, like, I'll be your spy. And then an explosion kills the Amazonian, and he miraculously survives this explosion, and he sees a skull, which is the skull of the priest, and inside the skull he sees a cricket, and he has a moment of clarity with this cricket, and then an explosion destroys the church, killing Jeremy. And then it's revealed that he miraculously survived and became a human cricket hybrid. They don't bother to explain how this makes any sense. He just says, oh, it's a mystery how I ended up like this, because clearly Mike Carlin just couldn't be fucked coming up with an actual reason as to why he mutated into a cricket. It's just like, oh, there was a cricket in the skull, Jeremy died in the explosion, and then I guess God just decided to make him a cricket guy. He tries to make use of his new powers by becoming an agent alongside these other bugged-themed characters. They get together as a group to fight against the Themyscirans. We have Firefly, Queen Bee, Blue Beetle is here, and then this character named Cockroach. That's right, this is Jaime Reyes as Blue Beetle. This is what he's like in the Flashpoint timeline. He barely gets to do anything because they raid a Amazonian base, and immediately they all get killed by the Amazons. Like, Firefly gets shot, and then everybody, just one after another, gets killed, including Blue Beetle, which doesn't make any sense. I just can't see a situation where Jaime Reyes, in his Blue Beetle armor, would not be able to survive against a group of Amazonians. But now he just gets shot and killed, and then we cut back to the present, and Ginny and Jeremy are getting close with each other, and then just out of nowhere an explosion happens, and she dies. Green Teeth dies, which explains why she's not in the Resistance miniseries, because she was dead by that point. But it's just so random. She just randomly dies, and they're just like, oh, I guess you were lucky enough not to die again, but poor Ginny. Anyway, let's fight more Amazonians. The end. This miniseries sucked. Let's move on. We now move on to Grodd of War. The story begins with Grodd talking about Aquaman and how he took over Europe and is now known as the most dangerous man on the planet. And he contemplates to himself, he's like, I slaughter half of Africa and most people don't even know my name. And it turns out that Grodd has killed a lot of people in Africa and he's taken over the whole thing. And for some reason they call him President Grodd instead of King Grodd. I don't know why he would want to be called that over a king. And before him, there was Emperor Solivar. And so he killed Solivar, took over Gorilla City, and then took over Africa. And Grodd is just way more brutal and violent in this than he is in the regular comics. This is kind of like, oh, what would Grodd be like if there was no Flash to keep him in check? And the answer to that is that you just get a bloody, gory, depressing one-shot that I didn't really enjoy. Grodd finds out that there is this character named Kongorilla, who was usually a human, but he became a gorilla and decided to discard his human form. He transplanted his mind into a gorilla body, and he wants to serve Grodd, and Grodd decides that he wants to fight Kongorilla to see how strong he is. So they go into an arena together, and Grodd fights against Kongorilla, and Kongorilla isn't really trying, and Grodd just throws him away and is like, come on, like, fight me, like, attack me, do whatever you can, kill me. And Kongorilla's like, but that doesn't seem fair. Grodd's like, fair? Yeah, I mean, fair? And then Grodd just attacks Kongorilla, beats the shit out of him, and Kongorilla is like, please, sir, like, I'm done, I give up. And Grodd just rips his head off. He's like, shut up. Rips his head off, kills him. He then turns to his follower and is like, whoever let this human into my army, find them and eviscerate them. He then goes to have a shower and is like, hey, heard anything about that human leader in Cape Town? And this other guy is like, yeah, he's planning to do an attack. And Grodd is like, well, I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna kill him myself. He gets into a limousine with some other gorillas and they start making their way to Cape Town. And I just find it really funny that these gorillas are driving in limousines. But on their way there, the cars explode, and then the drivers are shot and killed, and Grodd exits the limousine to find that the ones responsible for killing all of his followers are children. Just a bunch of army children. And then things get gruesome and depressing when Grodd uses his telepathic abilities against one of the kids to force him to kill his friends. And instead of getting the kid to off himself, Grodd instead tells the kid to remember him and grow hate towards him, and then when he's older, find him, hunt him down, and kill him, because all Grodd really wants is to die. That is something that we learn from this. We then see Grodd arrive in Cape Town, where we find out that the leader of Cape Town is Catman. We see him for a very brief moment before Grodd rips his spine out and kills him, because of course he does. And he just feels empty. Like this is just an empty win for him. He returns to his castle. He says that he's going to invade Europe. And his follower is like, I don't think that's a great idea with Aquaman and Wonder Woman there. I think we might end up dying. And Grodd is like, well, let's hope so. So I guess he's just hoping to go to Europe so that he can lose and finally die, because that's all he seems to want. And that is where the one-shot ends. And again, much like the Canterbury Cricket one, wasn't really a fan of this one, because there wasn't a lot of substance to it. It was just, oh, Grodd has taken over Africa and he goes on a violent rampage. The end. There were concepts here that were interesting, like Catman being a human resistance leader against Grodd, but we get nothing out of it. He just appears in one panel and then dies. The one-shot would have been much more interesting if it was Grodd's forces versus Catman's forces for the entire issue. We move on to Green Arrow Industries. In this timeline, Oliver Queen never became Green Arrow. Instead, he created Green Arrow Industries. He's very similar to how Tony Stark was at the beginning of Iron Man 1 before he became Iron Man, where Oliver Queen captures criminals and then he uses their technology to create weapons for the government to use. And this includes missiles that he calls the Green Arrows. His second in command is Roy Harper, who for some reason in this comic looks as old, if not older, than Oliver Queen does. And Roy Harper is a good guy. He's been working for Oliver Queen for 5 years now, and he tries to convince Ollie that there's more to this than just making weapons. He's like, hey, I know you're making weapons for the government, for the army and all that, but what if you use those weapons for good? Like, what if you created superheroes in your company to go out and fight supervillains? And Ollie's like, I don't know, Roy. I'm just a guy who makes weapons. I'm just a guy who makes missiles, and that's it. And Roy's like, just think about it. And then we cut to Roy dying because a bunch of Resistance members broke into Green Arrow Industries and killed everybody, including Roy Harper. I think at this point, almost every single member of the Teen Titans has died in the Flashpoint universe, except Beast Boy. Ollie sees on a screen that there is one member of the Resistance left, and he decides to go after her. He almost grabs a bow and arrow, and you're like, oh, this is the moment he becomes Green Arrow. But instead he throws it away, and he sees all of the Rogue's weapons, and he's like, that's more like it. So he gets all geared up. He's got all these different weapons from Pied Piper, the Trickster, Mr. Element, the Top, and as he's running through this forest, he gets shot in the head, and you're like, oh, I think he's dead. But no, he's not. It's actually a mirror copy. This Resistance member sees that it's a mirror copy, and Ollie comes up behind her, and so she tries to shoot him with her bow and arrow, because ironically, she has a bow and arrow. And they kind of just play cat and mouse, fighting each other. He's throwing his gadgets at her while she's shooting him with her bow and arrow, and they're having a conversation about what's going on and how she is going to expose the truth of Green Arrow Industries, and Ollie is like, what the hell are you talking about? And the entire time he's shooting what he thinks is Pied Piper's gun, but it actually turns out to be Heatwave's gun, so he accidentally sets the forest on fire. And she's like, you made all this technology and you're not even using it properly? Like, you're a massive idiot. And then we learn that the reason why she's led this resistance is because originally Oliver Queen had created facilities in random towns around America that were using the villains' technology to create weapons. And so those supervillains were attacking those facilities, which meant they were attacking towns in the USA and killing innocent people. And then Ollie decided, oh, that's problematic, so what I'll do is I'll move the facility to the island. But stupidly, he didn't tell anybody that he was moving the facilities to the island. So the supervillains still thought that they were in just random towns. So those towns continued to get attacked and innocent people continued to die. And so this girl wants to expose Ollie for everything. Ollie jumps up into the air using the Trickster's boots and gets shot at by this woman, and he falls to the ground, and one of the tops, explosive tops, goes off, sending both of them flying. And this is when we discover that this woman is related to Oliver Queen, because Ollie is like, hey, you know, I was thinking about this idea of possibly using Green Arrow Industries to create superheroes instead. And she starts laughing in his face. He's like, that's stupid. He also picks up her bow and arrow and is like, oh, this is the first time he picks up a bow and arrow. He's slowly transitioning to Green Arrow. And he learns from her that she is his daughter. That is the big twist. She is the daughter of Oliver Queen and Mary McCabe. Mary McCabe is Vixen. She works for Wonder Woman, so she's more of a supervillain in this timeline. And yeah, this is her daughter. And then Ollie's like, I don't even know how to shoot a bow and arrow. And he misses her with the arrow and then says to her that before he even started chasing her, he had a team that's tracking her down. And they will shoot her at any moment. and she doesn't believe him. And he's like, no, I'm telling the truth. I'm telling you the truth. And then she just gets riddled with bullets and killed by this squad. And they check in on Ollie to see if he's okay. And they tell him that they figured out that she's the daughter of Vixen. And they ask Ollie if he knew her, because it sounds like he kind of knows who she is. And he lies to them and says, nope, I have no idea who this girl is. I'm just a guy who makes missiles. And that's where it ends. And while I think this is better than the Grodd of War and Canterbury Cricket one-shot, this one still falls short because of its ending. I think it's just too edgy and depressing, where it's like, oh, this woman is his daughter and then she gets killed. And Oliver Queen doesn't learn anything and never becomes a superhero. He never becomes Green Arrow. He just continues to make weapons for the government, which is sad. It's sad that every single one of these, almost every Flashpoint tie-in and miniseries has to have a bad ending. It's almost like it was an editorial mandate. They were like, oh yeah, make sure every single one ends shit. And so we move on to Deadman and the Flying Graysons, and in this timeline, Hayley's Circus has quite a few more people involved in it. We've got a freak show that consists of Ragdoll, King Shark, and Dr. Fate, and we have the Flying Graysons, who still exist in this timeline because we learnt in the Batman miniseries that Thomas Wayne had killed Tony Zuko, so there was no Zuko to kill the Graysons, so Dick and his parents are still a troupe together well into Dick's adulthood, and I like that their costumes are all inspired by Nightwing. Like, even though he never became Nightwing, he would still gain a costume very similar to that. And alongside them is Boston Brand, who is usually in the main timeline Deadman, but in this timeline he's still alive. But that hasn't changed his personality. He's still an arsehole. Like, he's still a massive big-headed prick. The Graysons all fly together and are making the crowd happy, and Boston says that they're more like clowns because clowns are supposed to make the crowd happy, while his job is to make them terrified and show his death-defying stunts. Let them watch me step right up to the face of death, and then walk away in total defiance. It is the game I play, and I always win. They've just done a show in Austria, and the owner of Hayley Circus tells the mayor that they've never found a home because they don't need to. Because the mayor's like, hey, have you ever thought about settling down somewhere? And they're like, we don't need to because the home is each other. They start packing up everything to get ready to go to their next location, and Boston refuses to help anybody because he doesn't want to risk tearing his costume or dirtying his hands. And I like that the other characters point out that Boston is a prick, including Mary Grayson, which is like, yeah, he's big-headed, he's a prick, he's all the above. And then John Grayson explains that the reason Boston is like this is because he's an orphan, like he has no parents, he's been solo his entire life because he doesn't really trust anyone to perform with him. And Dick is like, well, I'm an only child as well, and I never ended up like him. And his parents are like, that's because we're here and we keep you grounded. It's really lovely seeing Dick Grayson interacting with his parents at an older age. That's one of the things I like about Flashpoint, is stuff like this, where things are very different and characters have different lives and relationships. They continue to make their way through Europe, looking for their next location, which they decide is going to be Poland. There's not a lot of places to choose from because the Themyscirans and the Atlanteans are attacking so much of Europe. And then we see that Dr. Fate has a connection to the original timeline. Like, he can see everything, and they just say he's nuts. But he sees that there used to be a Justice League, and that there is a Robin, and he makes note. He's like, Dick Grayson looks a lot like Robin. They then arrive in Poland, where Boston actually helps pitch in because everybody refused to help him unless he helped. And he goes over to Dr. Fate, and he's like, hey, Kent, can you help me? And Kent just isn't listening to him. He's like, get off your ass and give me a hand. And he goes over to Kent, and Kent grabs him and is like, Boston, you are going to suffer great loss. You will be haunted. haunted by death, Boston Brand. And we see a vision of Boston Brand standing over Dick Grayson's corpse. He's like, what the hell was that? I heard a voice. That was Dick. He was, screw you, Kent. Take care of your own damn posters, stupid freaks. We then cut to Austria, where it's being attacked by the Themyscirans, and one of them talks to the mayor and orders the mayor to tell them where Haley's circus is so that they can retrieve the helmet of Naboo. We then cut to a conversation between Boston and Dick, where Boston tries to get Dick to ditch his parents. He's like, they're holding you back, they're old, you're young, you've got so much ahead of you, you can be a great solo performer. And Dick is like, I don't need that. I'm fine being with my parents. That's exactly what I want. I'm happy being with them. Maybe the reason why you're so okay with doing solo performances is because you don't trust anyone to be able to catch you. The Graysons prepare for their performance while the ringleader makes his announcement. He's like, prepare to be amazed, prepare to be astounded, prepare to be blown away. And as he says this, we see the Themyscirans making their way to Haley's circus. This may very well be the Graysons' last performance. While the Graysons are in the middle of their performance, the Amazons smash through the tent, which causes Mary Grayson to fall to her death. That's right, one of the Graysons is dead, leaving only John and Dick to mourn her. It's really sad, and now everybody has to band together and make sure that the audience gets out safely, because these Themyscirans are in here killing people. Meanwhile, Boston's on his own, dodging swords and stuff, trying to keep himself safe. He's more preoccupied with his own safety. One of the Themyscirans goes up to Kent Nelson and looks in the helmet of Naboo and is like, that is our prize. I see my destiny in your helmet. And then King Shark comes up behind her and is like, it's not your destiny, it's me. And chomps down on her. And so everybody gets away while King Shark is eating this Themysciran. But then she punches through his mouth, killing him. So unfortunately, King Shark is dead. While the others get to safety, and Boston doesn't seem to give a shit about King Shark's death, and then all of a sudden, Count Vertigo shows up and starts using his powers against the Themyscirans. He is fighting against the Themyscirans. His powers just happen to affect Dick Grayson and friends as well, but he is a member of the Resistance, and so he tries to help Dick and friends, and then one of the Themyscirans is like, we don't need Kent Nelson, we just need the helmet of Naboo. So she throws a spear, which goes straight through Kent Nelson, killing him, and it also stabs John in the chest. So he's in bad condition. He's not dead yet, but he's very gravely injured. And there is a moment where Boston goes over to Kent Nelson. He's like, Boston Brand, what is it, Kent? I can see right through you. And then he dies. And I guess Kent was seeing his own death when he saw Boston standing over Dick Grayson's corpse. Unless there's two visions. And Dick is still destined to die in the future. But now Dick is in a desperate position because his father is possibly going to die, just like his mother, and so he's going to end up alone. And so Count Vertigo is like, come with me, we'll go into the sewers so that we can hide away and I can tell you everything. And he explains to them that he was a count with a family, and then the Resistance killed his family and ravaged his homelands, and so now he's trying to get revenge against them. Meanwhile, Dick is like, I gotta get you to the hospital, Dad, because you're gonna die. And John's like, it's all good, don't worry about me, son. You just gotta focus on your safety and everybody else's. Vertigo explains that Cyborg is bringing together a team and that they're gonna wait for him, and they should be all safe once Cyborg arrives with his allies, and that they just gotta keep the helmet of Naboo away from the Themyscirans. And Boston still doesn't give a shit, and he starts giving lip to Dick Grayson. He's like, this has nothing to do with us. And Dick punches him in the face. He's like, what the hell are you talking about? It has nothing to do with us. My mom is dead. My dad is dying. We are in this right now. What am I doing even trying to talk to you? You're already dead on the inside. Later, there's a moment between Boston and John where John tells Boston that if he passes away, make sure that Dick is not alone, because Dick has never been alone. and he should never be alone. So he just wants Boston to look after him. It's a very sweet moment. Meanwhile, the Amazons are torturing people to find out the location of the Helmet of Naboo, and they realize that the Helmet of Naboo is indestructible. So they're like, if we destroy everything, then all that's left will be the helmet, and then we can find it easily. And they turn to one of their allies, Starfire, and tell her to burn everything to the ground. So in this timeline, it seems Starfire works for the Themyscirans and Wonder Woman, and she wears a crazy outfit in this. Like, look at this shit. This is insane. I don't get how this front piece even stays attached to her body. Starfire begins her reign of terror across Europe, killing people in search of the Helmet of Naboo. Meanwhile, the Resistance are in the sewers figuring out what to do, and Ragdoll is like, hey, why don't we just destroy the Helmet of Naboo? That way they can't get it. And Vertigo is like, no, you simpleton. It is made of magic. You cannot destroy it. Meanwhile, Dick is spending his last moments with his father, who sadly passes away. And as he passes away, we see a flashback of him training Dick. Dick misses a jump, and John explains to him that it's okay. It's like, new tricks always feel strange and even scary. Just remember, you have to learn to miss the jump before you learn to make the jump. Boston tells Dick that they gotta get away from the cursed helmet. And Dick is like, you can do whatever you want, but I'm a part of this now. And so they go up to the surface and decide to fight against the Resistance, or at least avoid them for as long as they can and not die. And Boston is focused on making sure that Dick doesn't die because he promised John that he would protect his son. And one of the Amazons grabs Dick by the legs, and Boston's like, Dick! And then we unfortunately see the death of Ragdoll, where he gets grabbed by one of the Themyscirans, and Dick is like, let go of him! And she's like, okay, freak show, let's see how flexible you really are. And she just bends and breaks Ragdoll, mangling him and killing him. It's pretty grotesque and horrifying. And then we see the death of Count Vertigo, who tries to use his powers against one of them, but because she can hear him, she throws her spear at him, and it stabs Vertigo, killing him. And so Dick grabs the helmet, and they're like, oh, we gotta get out of here. Starfire starts chasing after Dick and Boston, shooting at them, and then she hits a wall, and it collapses, and Dick and Boston get knocked over, and Boston wakes up, and he sees Dick lying on the ground, and he thinks Dick is dead. He's like, oh no, this is the vision. Oh no, please, don't be dead. And it turns out that Dick isn't dead, and Boston tries talking to Dick, and he's like, oh, thank God, I thought you were dead. And he walks straight through him, because it turns out that Boston is the one who has died. And Boston's like, no, I'm dead, and he can't hear me. And he keeps trying to communicate to Dick, but he can't do anything. He also tries to fight the Themyscirans, but he can't do anything. He just goes straight through Starfire, and so he has no choice but to watch Dick. Dick heads over to a couple of gas tanks, and he pours the gas out of it, like he turns the nozzle on it. All the gas starts pouring out, and then he starts running along the train while Starfire is shooting at him, because Dick plans on using her fire against her, because it will cause the gas to explode. Dick plans on making a jump for it away from the explosion, but Boston says that Dick can't jump far enough, but he can. And so Boston possesses Dick's body and uses him to jump and grab onto a cable away from the explosion. The explosion goes off and kills Starfire and the Themyscirans. So that is how Starfire dies. Unfortunately, she was a villain in this timeline. They didn't really explain why. She was more of like a background character. But now Dick and Boston are wandering through the wasteland together, except Dick doesn't know that Boston is there with him. And that is when Dick comes face to face with Britannia, who says that she is a member of the Resistance, and Dick states that he is now a member of the Resistance as well and will join her, and from now on they will call him Dr. Fate. So Dick Grayson becomes Dr. Fate in this timeline. We also see Kid Devil here, who is the sidekick of Blue Devil, and the Phantom Stranger. So apparently they are members of the Resistance as well. Sorry, not the Phantom Stranger. The Question. It's supposed to be the Question. But that is the end of Deadman and the Flying Graysons, written by J.T. Kroll with art by Fabrizio Fiorentino. And I enjoyed this one a lot. This is definitely the best miniseries that I've read so far of the comics that we've read this week. And maybe even the best miniseries that I've read in the entirety of Flashpoint. So now we move on to the final miniseries, which is Kid Flash Lost. Written by Sterling Gates with art by Oliver Nome and Trevor Scott. The story begins in Central City where cops are going after Hot Pursuit, which can't be possible because the Hot Pursuit we know is dead, and that is when Hot Pursuit's bike starts going out of control and Hot Pursuit gets teleported away somewhere. And then we cut to Bart Allen, who is chasing after Barry Allen, his grandfather, and Barry is being real weird, being really, really mean to Bart. Like, in the final arc of the Flash series before Flashpoint, he was a little mean to Bart because Barry was going through a lot of things, but this is him taking things way too far, and that is when Bart realizes that Central City looks a little bit different than usual, and that there's no way Barry Allen would be this mean to him. And so he's like, "You are not my granddad, so you can eat it." And he uppercuts Barry in the face, and it is revealed that Bart is actually in some kind of virtual reality machine, and he's in some kind of like alien ship or facility, and he breaks his way out, and as he is exploring this facility and is kind of like, "Oh, where the hell am I?" he sees these giant robots that are very clearly Brainiac robots, because they have like the Brainiac symbol on them. So it's obvious that Brainiac is behind this, and Bart very quickly realizes that he doesn't have powers because the Speed Force doesn't exist. And that is when he comes face to face with Brainiac, Flashpoint Brainiac to be specific, and Flashpoint Brainiac is kind of like evil cyborg. Even though he's always kind of been like a robot alien, really depends on what version of Brainiac you're talking about, this one seems to be pretty much just a robot with a little bit of flesh. Brainiac grabs Bart, calling him a time anomaly, and plans on trying to take the chronal energy out of him to use it for something, but before he can say what, he gets attacked by Hot Pursuit, who is very clearly a woman here, so it is definitely not the alternate Barry Allen that we know, unless he had boobs and I never even realized. So she grabs Bart and the two of them head off on her motorcycle, and they get to a point where they see exactly where they are, which is Metropolis in the year 3011, which is where Bart Allen comes from, but it was not like this. So they're kind of like, "Oh, we must be in a different timeline." And Hot Pursuit believes that she was responsible for this, that her motorcycle was being weird, she pressed a button, and now she's here. And that is when Bart asks her who she is, and it is revealed that this Hot Pursuit is Patty Spivot. The same Patty Spivot from the normal timeline. Because after the whole ordeal with Reverse Flash, she was told to clean up the crime scene, and instead of doing that, she decided, "I want to do something bigger with my life, I'm going to become Hot Pursuit." So she grabbed his suit and put it on, and then started riding his motorcycle. Bart states that they need to get home fast because they're not supposed to be here, and she's like, "Why? How do you know?" It's like, "Because I saw this movie with Cassie," because throughout this he mentions his friends, and he's like, "If we don't get hit with some Speed Force lightning, I'm history," and we see that Bart his hand is fading away from existence. So while Bart and Patty are chilling, chatting together about the whole situation that they're in, Bart decides to put on the Hot Pursuit helmet. And he's like, "Hey, how do you make this thing work? Do I just tell it, show me everything?" And then all of a sudden, Bart starts getting all this data just thrown straight into his brain from the helmet, which is showing him how the Flashpoint timeline came to be, or what it looks like. He sees Thomas Wayne Batman and Abin Sur Green Lantern and all that shit, and it really overloads him, and he starts having a seizure on the ground, and that's when a bunch of Brainiac's robot balls come in, and so Patty starts fighting against them, and one of them grabs Bart, and Bart wakes up, and he's like, "What the? Put me down, Dr. Ball!" And that is when Patty comes riding in on the motorcycle, smashing straight into it, and she's like, "We gotta get out of here." And so Bart gets onto the motorcycle, and he's like, "Alright, I'll drive." And so he starts driving through the city as they're being chased by Brainiac's forces, and he's never driven this thing before, so he's driving like crazy, and Patty's like, "What the hell, are you trying to kill us?" And Bart's like, "Nah, it's fine, like, I've driven the Batwing before." Eventually they get to safety, and Patty continues to have a go at Bart, but eventually she apologizes to him and is like, "This world is just messing with me right now." And then she thinks back to when she was in the VR, Brainiac's VR, and she tells Bart that the thing that she was reliving over and over again was that when she was a kid, she drowned and then was resuscitated. And she was reliving that in a time loop, which was awful. And then Bart talks about how he was reliving the stuff with his granddad hating him and all that. And then he explains to Patty that they've got to find the Speed Force because things are getting worse for him. He's continuing to be erased. And in order to find the Speed Force, they have to find the engine that powers the motorcycle that Hot Pursuit uses, because that engine is made out of Speed Force energy. Bart comes up with a plan to get captured by Brainiac on purpose so that Brainiac will put him into the VR machine. So he calls Brainiac through his computers and starts making fun of him, saying that, like, "Oh, Brainiac 5 told me that you suck and you're a loser." And so he gets captured by Brainiac, put into the VR, and because he's in the VR, Bart can use super speed while inside it. And what he does is he uses his brain at super speed to take over all of Brainiac's systems and hack into them. And that allows him to deactivate Brainiac's security so that Hot Pursuit can come in and attack Brainiac from behind. They find the tank that powers the motorcycle, and Patty grabs it, but then she gets attacked by Brainiac from behind, which doesn't kill her, but it gravely injures her. And so she grabs the engine, and she's like, "Bart, use the Speed Force, fix everything." And she smashes it onto the ground, which causes a massive explosion, which hits Bart, giving him a surge of Speed Force energy that he uses to travel through time. He needs to find the one person that can help him undo everything, and that person is Barry Allen. Like, and I will find the Flash even if it kills me. In Texas, 1889, we meet Max Mercury. Back then, he was known as the Windrunner, and he's working with the people at Fort Mockingbird, where they see that something is going on in the distance. There's some strange lightning, so he goes to check it out, and when he gets there, he sees Bart Allen, who seems to have been taken over by the Black Flash. He's become the Black Flash somehow. He's not sure why. It's a bit of a mystery, and he's like, "Max, you don't know who I am, but I know who you are. Eventually, you will be forced to jump through time and become Max Mercury, but you need to stay away from me right now because I think I'm becoming the Black Flash. It's too dangerous to be near me." And Max grabs him anyway and gets shocked by this Black Flash energy, and unfortunately, Max dies, and Bart siphons the Speed Force from him and teleports away, and he finds himself falling through time. The Black Flash energy that is within him is pushing him through time, and he is hopping from speedster to speedster. So he goes from Max Mercury to Jay Garrick after his accident, where unfortunately, in this timeline, Jay Garrick did not survive the accident and become the Flash. He died, and Bart siphons the Speed Force energy from him and time jumps again, where he comes face to face with Iris. This is like a future of Flashpoint where Iris is older now, and she is mourning Wally's death. And Bart is like, "What the hell? This is Wally's grave? There's no way. That's the Flash I looked up to the most. How is he dead? What happened to him?" And Iris explains everything to him, what happened with Citizen Cold. And Bart then turns to the Speed Force and he's like, "You know what? I'm done being your guinea pig. You're not throwing me through time anymore. I'm taking over. I'm taking the reins." And so he starts pushing himself. He runs into the Speed Force, going as fast as he can, the fastest he's ever gone, because he needs to find his granddad. And he manages to shake off the power of the Black Flash and return to his regular form. And as he runs through the Speed Force, he starts seeing memories of Barry Allen and how Barry was born and became the Flash. And we see a moment where Bart Allen ends up in a time where Barry and Iris are talking to each other, and Iris is like, "You really do care about Bart, don't you?" And Barry says, "Yes. I care a lot about Bart, and I'm happy that he's a part of our family, our Flash family." And as Bart is watching this, Barry appears next to him. He's like, "Of course you matter to me, Bart." And Bart explains to Barry what's going on. He says that he wants to help his granddad fix everything, and in order to do that, he's brought the Speed Force within him, and he's going to pass it on to his granddad. And this is when Bart Allen becomes the living embodiment of the Speed Force himself, which he refers to as a White Flash, which is like the Flash version of a White Lantern. And then Bart disintegrates, very similarly to how Barry disintegrated during Crisis on Infinite Earths. He becomes one with the Speed Force. He imbues the Speed Force into Barry, and Barry is able to use the Speed Force to stop Flashpoint and reboot the timeline. And we are left with a final message from Bart Allen. "I told Hot Pursuit that we could change everything, that we could save everyone. Save us. I can feel the warmth of the Speed Force taking me, pulling me in again. I regret nothing. I don't regret what I did today. Now for possibly the last time. My name is Bart Allen. I'm Kid Flash, the fastest teen alive. Today is the day that Kid Flash raced the Flash, and it's the day that in order to save everything, Kid Flash lost. But because I lost, that means an entire universe will win life. It felt good to throw this race. I mean, sometimes you gotta let the old guys win in order to make them feel special, right? But we all know I'm way faster. Kid Flash fact. Run, Flash. Run." The end. And that was a great ending to the World of Flashpoint. That was the final Flashpoint miniseries. We are done with all of the Flashpoint tie-ins. I like that the name of this miniseries had two meanings. You know, Kid Flash lost because Kid Flash was lost in time, but also Kid Flash lost because it ended with him having to lose in order for everybody to win. This and the Booster Gold tie-ins are definitely up there as my favorite miniseries. This is a great send-off for Bart Allen. Unfortunately, things would not go super well for him. Going into the New 52, we end up with some new version of Bart who, in comparison, is not a very good character. But that's going to be it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week for Flashpoint itself. We will be wrapping it up. Have a good one.